Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about another apostle, and this time it's James, the son of Alpheus. If you remember, whenever we started this Bible study looking at the lives of the 12 apostles, we said that the apostles, all 12, are organized in three groups of four. And the order is often coded in the Gospels in order of their intimacy. So we have Peter, Andrew, James, and John, two sets of brothers who are the closest to Jesus. They're there all the time. They're with him in very intimate circumstances. Then after that, the second group is made up of Philip, Nathaniel, Matthew, and Thomas the twin. And again, that's the second group of people that are not with Jesus all the time. They're not less important. Jesus doesn't have favorites. He has intimates, which makes the whole thing very, very different. Then with James, the ninth apostle, we are introduced to the last group of the 12. This group seems to be less known, but it's made up from James, the son of Alpheus, or James the Less, Simon the Zealot, Judas, not Iscariot. This seems to have three names. We'll talk about him later. And of course, Judas Iscariot, that later on betrayed Jesus. Now, whether they are very intimate with Jesus or less intimate with Jesus, we know that all 12 apostles at some point left everything to follow Jesus. So yes, they are, some of them are closer to Jesus than others, but we have to understand that all of them left everything. All of them struggled at some point with doubt, disbelief, and some even struggled with confusion. All of them have been empowered by Jesus, given the authority, and sent out to preach the good news, to cast out demons, to heal those that had needs. And one point that I want to make at this stage is that we've got to remember that it wasn't just the 12 that were sent out, 70 were sent out to preach the good news. And so we got to understand that not all 70 were men. Some of them were women. We know the women often follow Jesus. But we seem to forget that, and we seem to focus on the 12. We know that at least 70 were sent out two by two, empowered by Jesus, and given that authority. Later on, it's the 12 that Jesus entrusts with the church, and all of them, except Judas Iscariot, have been able to endure to the end, and in the end died for their faith. When it comes to James, the son of Alpheus, we need to recognize that we know very little of this apostle. There are three people in the New Testament called James. We have James, the son of Zebedee, the brother of John, who we find is killed by Herod very early in the book of Acts. The second James is the half-brother of Jesus. We read about him in Galatians 1:19, who is the son of Mary and Joseph. He is the leader in the church in Jerusalem. He becomes the spokesman of the church in Jerusalem. He's the one that did not believe in Jesus until his resurrection, and he's the one that writes the epistle of James. Church history knows this James, the half-brother of Jesus, as camel knees James. And the reason for that is Eusebius, the historian, gives him this name because the early church knew James as a praying man, and he was so much on his knees that his knees literally were so, the skin of his knees got so hard it looked like the knees of a camel. If you look at the picture of a camel, you find that the knees of the camel are so hard, callous, and so they called him the camel knees James because of his prayer life. Then we have the James, the son of Alpheus, or James the Less. We read about him in Matthew 10 verse 3, in Mark 3:18, Luke 6:15, and Acts 1:13. 3. Now, what I want you to do at the moment is have a look at Mark 15 verse 40. This is the episode where Jesus is killed, is crucified. He has just cried out with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which is verse 33, which means, my God, why have you abandoned me? They ran to him with a sponge of sour wine, but he's already gone. They think he's thirsty. Then the Roman officer in verse 39, the Roman officer or the centurion who stood facing him saw how he had died. He exclaimed, this man truly was a son of God. So in this context, we are introduced to some of the women who were watching. Some women were there watching from a distance, including Mary Magdalene, Mary, and this is the bit that we're interested in, Mary, the mother of James the Less, or the younger, and of Joseph, or Jonas. And so we are introduced to James Mikros, James the Less. Now, this word Mikros could be translated in several ways. It could mean that he was short in stature. It could mean that he was younger, therefore they tried to differentiate between James, the brother of John, who was older, to this James, who most likely was short or younger, but also could mean less prominent. So in the end of the day, that's all we know from the scriptures about this James. Now that's interesting. You don't need to know a lot in order to get a picture of the person. So it could be that he was small in stature, he was young, or maybe a very quiet person who was in the background. These small details can give us a little picture of his character. And mostly is this idea that in a world that is full of loud, charismatic personalities, we have this man called James the Less, who is probably smaller, younger. My inkling is that it's a picture of his character who is less prominent. Compare this James with James the older, or the son of thunder, the son of Zebedee, who is very loud, very ready to call down fire from heaven when the Samaritans reject Jesus. Compare this James with Peter, who's always talking, always saying something, no matter how silly and crazy. Here is a guy who is quiet, reserved. We don't hear him say anything. Whether he said something, it's not recorded. Whether he wrote something, it never survived. It's a man that has no name except the Less. James the Less. This brings me to this amazing and wonderful conclusion that the Church of Jesus Christ doesn't necessarily need only the loud and the prominent personalities, the charismatic leaders, the people that talk all the time. We also need the quiet and the reserved. We also need the people that are in the background, shy to appear at the front. Not everybody is called on the stage. Not everybody is called to be in the front line. There is enough to be done in the background. And I believe that this is essential to understand that we all need each other in the body of Jesus Christ. If there is one lesson that I learned from James the Less, is this: the people on the stage could not do what they do without the people behind the scenes. And that's a fact of life. But it takes an amazing and wonderful dynamic when we talk about the Church of Jesus Christ. Let me show you something. If you come with me to the book of Hebrews in chapter 11, when we talk about the the Hall of Fame of faith, when we talk about these amazing people of faith, we come to verse 33, and this is what we read. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back again from death. But others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at, and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prisons. Some died by stoning. Some were sewed in half, and others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the grounds. All these people, after a whole chapter is spent on people like Abel and Enoch, people like Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, the people of Israel, Rahab, Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all these other prophets. We have several verses about the unnamed heroes of our faith. We don't know their names. What we know, they were faithful. There were people in the background. There were people that were reserved and quiet, that never came to the forefront of anything. And yet, God praises them for their faithfulness. For God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us. They all earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. I love this idea of these unsung heroes. Some of the possible facts about James the less significant, James the young, James the small or the short, is that in Mark 2 verse 14, we read that Levi or Matthew's father was a guy called Alpheus. So we could conclude that James, the son of Alpheus, is the brother of Matthew, the son of Alpheus. It could be, according to Mark 15 and John 19, verse 25, that James the Less is the same son of Mary, who was the sister of Mary, the mother of Jesus, which would make James the Less a cousin of Jesus. These are all speculations. We don't know the pedigree of the man. Sometimes things can only be determined in eternity. But we need to focus on what we know. You've heard me often say, what we know is what we know, and what we don't know is what we don't know. And we don't need to know everything. We know this. James the Less left everything to follow Jesus. James the Less, like all of us at some point, have fought doubt, disbelief, and confusion. But in the end, they were able to put their trust and faith in Jesus to such a degree that paid with his life for his faith. Just like all the 70 and all the 12, he was empowered by the Holy Spirit, sent with the authority of Jesus, and entrusted by Jesus with his church. And in the end, he endured to death. That's what matters. I love this idea. Not everybody is called to be a Peter. Not everybody is called to be a Matthew. Not everybody is called to be an Andrew. There is enough room in the body of Jesus Christ for everybody. Whether you are an impulsive personality like Peter, or whether you are quiet and reserved like James the Less. Whether you get the nickname of Son of Thunder, or whether you get the nickname the Less. There's always room in the body of Jesus Christ for everybody. I pray that no matter who you are, no matter what your personality is, you will find place in the body of Jesus Christ. Maybe you're Peter. You need to learn some very hard lessons of humility and patience. Or maybe you are James the Less. Maybe you need to learn to reach out and not be isolated. It's very easy to be isolated when you are happy with your own company. The introverts need to learn how to come out of their shells. The extroverts need to learn how to be quiet and listen. But when we get this balance right, the body of Christ will be enriched and blessed by the variety of personalities all around. I love it when the men of God come together, very different personalities, different temperaments, and together they are one body. So this is what I want you to take from James the Less. No matter whether you're short or tall, no matter whether you're young or old, no matter whether you are famous or unknown, whether you are prominent or less prominent, we all together make the body of Jesus Christ, and we all need each other. May God bless you and be with you as you discuss the life of James the Less. Take care.